Yeah.
You have still something to ask, the Blessed Mother's asking sister. Today is the last time I will speak to you in a living voice. From now on, you will obey the one sent to you, who was Father Yasuda, and your superior. And her superior at that time for the nuns was actually a French priest that was there.
Let's talk about the message of Our Lady of Akita. Speak of a coming of chastisement. If humanity does not repent, do you believe we are nearing the fulfillment of this warning? And how should we Catholics prepare for this?
So I think the best thing to put it in context is the October 13th, 1973 is the final message of the Blessed Mother to Sister Agnes Sasagawa. And she just died about 5 weeks ago at the age of 93.
93.
You know, so she lived a very long life, and people know she was originally deaf and then healed. And so, but then, you know, the stigmata, the statue of Our Lady of All Nations, you know, but the message, I think before we get into the final, most severe message that I have personally ever read in the history of the Holy Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church, there's no message as severe as this. So this could give a little bit of a distorted vision or experience for people going right to this final message, because the messages previously, which took place over a total of 9 years, a 9-year period where Sister Agnes would always see a burst of light. The message of Akita, Japan, is about the same thing as it is at Fatima and Garabandal.
Yes.
The supremacy of the Eucharist as well as priests. And so the message there is also of her title of co-redemptrix, mediatrix, and advocate, which is also the message of Amsterdam, which the church just about a month ago came down hard on Amsterdam. So there's speculation right now, and we got into this earlier, is Akita Japan and is going to be one of these more negative categories. So we've got to get into a little bit of the early part of the message that Sister Agnes Sasagawa would actually go into the chapel, and there would be like this burst of light coming from the tabernacle to where she would then lay prostrate. And then over time, she actually would have the equivalent of a small stigmata where blood would come from her palm, as it did also from the statue, and it would form it would actually congeal into the form of a cross on her palm. So there's the very, very positive aspects of this, and it also deals with all of the major apparitions, the supremacy of the real presence of the Eucharist, and the importance of the priesthood. And because this message is tied into Amsterdam, of where the Blessed Mother appeared, you know, a total of 101 times to Sister Agnes Sasagawa. And that's where they get the 101, first being Eve, and then the 0 being eternity of God, and then the 1 being the Blessed Mother, which I think we should even read that last of what Sister Agnes's comment was. There is a meaning to the figure 101. It signifies that sin came into the world by a woman, and it is also by a woman that salvation came to the world. The 0 between the two signifies the eternal God who is from all eternity until eternity. The first one represents Eve, and the last one, the Virgin Mary. So there you go. There's the 101. So if you want to read, do you want to read the whole October 13th, 1970?
Yeah.
Put it in context, or do you want me
to?
I think we should start, because I sent you some material where it says in just before the second paragraph. Let me read it because I have it outlined.
Yeah.
You have still something to ask, the Blessed Mother's asking sister. Today is the last time I will speak to you in a living voice. From now on, you will obey the one sent to you, who was Father Yasuda, and your superior. And her superior at that time for the nuns was actually a French priest that was there.
Mm.
So here's the zinger. Here's the message of all messages that really, frankly, bring a lot of emotion.
Yes.
And a lot of people, frankly, really bent out of shape on authenticity, that the Blessed Mother would say something this severe to humanity. And now, mind you, this is October 13th, 1973. So that's a long time ago. Pray very much the prayers of the Rosary. I alone am able to save you from the calamities that approach. Those who place their confidence in me will be saved. Very important to hear that. Those who place their confidence in me will be saved. My dear daughter, listen well to what I have to say to you. You will inform your superior. As I told you, if men do not repent and better themselves, the Father will inflict a terrible punishment on all humanity. It will be a punishment greater than the deluge, such as one will never have seen before. Fire will fall from the sky and will wipe out a great part of humanity, the good as well as the bad, sparing neither priests nor faithful. The survivors will find themselves so desolate that they will envy the dead. Whoa. The only arms that will remain for you will be the rosary and the sign left by my son. Each day recite the prayers of the rosary. With the rosary, pray for the Pope, the bishops, and the priests. The work of the devil will infiltrate even the church in such a way that one will see cardinals opposing cardinals, bishops against other bishops. Now, mind you, that language is very, very close to Garabandal and Fatima.
Yes.
Okay, so we can see that there's going to be evil and apostasy penetrating the church all the way to the top. And we can see this today. We've never seen this in the church, where we've had such open opposition in writing and speech from cardinals opposing cardinals. These people have had profound differences in the past, frankly, due to their titles, their positions, their egos, and their authorities. But we've never seen people coming against the magisterium like this from high positions. The priests who venerate me will be scorned and opposed by their confreres. Churches and altars sacked. The church will be full of those who accept compromises, and the demon will press many priests and consecrated souls to leave the service of the Lord. The demon will be especially implacable against souls consecrated to God. The thought of the loss of so many souls is the cause of my sadness. If sins increase in number and gravity, there will no longer be pardon for them. With courage, speak to your superior. He will know how to encourage each one of you to pray and to accomplish works of reparation. So that is the end of that message. And that right there, that message, books and dozens and hundreds of books have in essence been written on that message alone, around that message of what's being said. It's absolutely loaded with things like evil penetrating into the interior of the church. Fire will fall from heaven. Many will not, the good and the bad will equally have difficulty. So, as I say, I think it's the most severe message ever given to the church. And the present bishop in Akita is not in favor of it. And Bishop Ito, who was the one who approved it way back, he actually wrote a beautiful laudatory letter. And what we're reading from is I wrote a book in 1993 with a 2010 update called The Thunder of Justice, where I put Bishop Ito's letter in it, of how he publicly affirmed what took place there, as well as all of the messages from Akita, Japan. So Akita has been central for a lot of people to understand. And this is also very similar to the message of La Salette, where, there would be severe problems inside the church, where the devil will literally enter the church. And we know that Pope Paul VI talked about the smoke in the sanctuary. Now, the sanctuary is where the priest vests. So it's basically it's right into the interior of the church.
I'm curious, what is the real standing of Akita, the status of its approval?
It's still in the same position that it was before, but it's like we mentioned Julia Kim, where she was actually very much Julia Kim the other day, I heard of Naju, Korea. She has had a total of 33 Eucharistic miracles. I was with Julia Kim, actually, the first time was in 1990. She was in my van. We sponsored a conference, and she spoke at it, and it was actually on Capitol Hill. And she actually asked me if I would bring her to the White House, which is only 16 blocks from there. She wanted to see it. She was in the back of my van with the wounds on her face of the stigmata. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw it. She asked me to bring her there, and she wanted me to drive in front of the White House. And I was also with her in Hawaii at a conference, a Eucharistic conference, where she actually had a Eucharistic miracle at the conference in 1994 in Hawaii. So her previous bishops have very much been in favor, but this present one is not. And I'm not sure if she's been condemned. She may have been condemned by this bishop now. But please, look, because I was just with somebody the other night who had been that person who sponsored that trip to Hawaii. We ended up having dinner twice before he went to Fatima, Santiago, Garabandal, and ended up at Lourdes. And we had dinner twice before and after the trip because he flew home from my local airport. And so I think it has been a very negative judgment on her. But this gets back to the vicissitudes of the local bishop, to where they approve or don't approve, and then another bishop who approves doesn't approve, and then one who doesn't approve, the next one opens the case, finds more information, digs deeper, and then says it's worthy of belief. So this is why, as I say, these new norms from 3 to 6 have more nuances of a judgment of a bishop as well as the Vatican. Perfect in this, and I've been saying this for my whole lifetime. Brain surgery is easier than this.
Yeah. So right now, what is the status of Akita in those 6 guidelines?
It would be the equivalent, I guess it would be the equivalent of left alone, which in the old rubric, leave it alone. It hasn't been condemned or approved, which, Garabandal at this very day is in that. Medjugorje was in that yesterday, and in many respects is in it today, but it's more encouraging, that there has been a favorable disposition, just short of magisterial approval of the messages and the devotion. So there's these nuances in there that have to really be looked at. That's why for somebody looking to see how the church gives a designation, they need to look at the criteria that the church is going to judge to put it in one of these 6 new norms. So again, as of this date today, it's been left alone, but we don't know what's going to happen to it in the future. I think it's because there's so many similarities to Amsterdam. There could be
Our Lady of all Nations.
Our Lady of all Nations. Yeah, I think there could be something coming down shortly on that, but I don't know.
Okay.
Until it's on the letterhead of the DDF, I'm not talking about it. People can speculate, but it has no foundation or real. It doesn't have any teeth in it because nobody knows until the DDF. I see a ton of stuff coming across my desk from people that are really, really knowledgeable about this. But at the end of the day, if you really want to get into it, they're guessing.
Some says that after the death of Sister Sasagawa, the prophecy will be fulfilled by the message of Akita.
Well, there's quite a bit. I mean, we just read only one of three major messages. There's many more, but the major message we just read. So if you're saying, is fire going to fall from heaven, because it's going to be now fulfilled? The answer is, she's been only gone now 5 weeks. So, I don't get into that kind of thinking. When it's fulfilled, it's fulfilled. And you can see the authentic apparitions. They always speak about the same thing. They speak about the primacy of the Eucharist. They speak about the necessity of being obedient. And there are so many people guessing. And to sit around and speculate, I feel it's a fool's errand. I mean, what happens in Rome is one thing, but the most important thing is literally the message of the gospel for us living today and tomorrow. Are we going to Mass daily, if possible? Are we being obedient? Because you'll know a person is a disciple by their obedience. Are we doing what we should? Are we being a good husband, wife, father? Disciplining children correctly, lovingly, teaching them the faith. Is there the rosary at the home? So people go off into the wild blue yonder in many of these prophecies. And frankly, there's a really negative aspect right now taking place in the Catholic world where people are just looking for the sensational to get clicks.
Yes.
And, they're really, if you want to look at the sensational, there's many, and it usually is around entertainment type websites of the outrageous. And I think there's a bit of a trap right now of Catholics, rather than trying to be obedient to what they know to be, to the rubrics and the fundamentals of the faith, sitting around all day long listening to people talk in cafes rather than doing corporal works of mercy and doing things that they should be doing. Because there's many people just absolutely consumed by social media. Now, there's a really positive aspect that, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I do many days, nice days. I have some woods near me, and there's a beautiful, beautiful trail to walk. There's a stream there, with this foliage, and it's beautiful. And so I do a rosary there, and many times I'll make calls there. I walked yesterday for about 90 minutes. You'll make a few calls, but there's so there should be prayer time, and then I listen to podcasts there. So there's an element to be educated that's very healthy. But I think we've gone over the edge in the last several years with, frankly, a lot of podcasters and people seeking out the sensational. And I think it's really detrimental to the faith, because the message of Jesus is about one thing and one thing only: the redemption of man and the amendment of life, where Jesus goes after the lost sheep, the Zacchaeus, the man in the sycamore tree, the Mary Magdalene, a man like Joseph of Arimathea, a Nicodemus type. They were very, very educated. You had Lazarus, who was very, very wealthy and like a father to Jesus, where Jesus even wept over him. And we have people like Martha that he can bring in. We have the centurion. So Jesus, we have the disparity of people like a Matthew, who was frankly a grifter and a grinder, extorting the apostles as he was working for the Romans as a tax collector. We have the demure younger people like a St. John. We have a Judas who is always scheming and thought that Jesus was going to have an earthly kingdom, and he wanted Jesus to wear a royal purple for kingship. And then we have a Thomas who had a different personality. So, Jesus he reaches everybody through the purity of his life. And we have lost that aspect of the gospel, that the gospel, we need to be the living tabernacle for many people versus always just speaking about things that aren't fundamental to the faith.
Yeah.
And I think we're all guilty of it. We spend way too much time as right now Catholics around inane and banal activity versus, how many people have actually, listening to this, how many people have fasted in the last month, where Jesus was very, very clear, in Matthew 17, unless by prayer and fasting, this cannot be driven out. And if you really want to go to battle, that's when you start fasting. When you're up against a brick wall, you can't go any further. You can't even get around it. You have to somehow go through that. And the only way you're going to be able to go through that is through prayer and fasting. So how many people have fasted for victories in their life in the last month, last week, last 2 weeks, last 3 weeks? And the answer is not many.
Yeah,
how many people are saying a daily rosary as asked? And the answer is not as many as they should. And if we were doing these things, we would find that our life would be less troublesome.
Wow.
And that's the message, frankly, of Akita. It's where, if you go back and look at the early occurrences, it was all Eucharistic. The message initially was all about the real presence. That's the message, Sister Agnes Sasagawa, in a nutshell, the real presence of the Eucharist, which since 1973, how many have actually doubted that, including clergy?
That's a good reminder. Especially for watching this interview with you. So it's the basic in our spirituality.
That's right.
We should do. The events of Akita also highlights the role of guardian angels. So what Catholics learn from this?
Well, it was the guardian angels who first came. I always call the guardian angels, softening the beachhead. I mean, if you really want to look at it, the Blessed Mother was the first tabernacle. And it was an angel who appeared to her and, be not afraid. Let's face it, an angel just standing next to you would startle anybody. I don't know exactly where the Blessed Mother was when that happened. Scripture doesn't say, but somebody all of a sudden in an angelic figure will startle anybody, no matter who they are. So it was even an angel that prepared the Blessed Mother for her ministry. And the same thing actually happened at Garabandal, where the angels came first to the girls. I call that softening the beachhead, kind of in the vernacular, to where it kind of prepares them for the main event of the Blessed Mother or Jesus appearing. And so I think it's the way heaven softens things up to where, it'd be too much emotionally. The guardian angels did appear to Sister Agnes several times before the Blessed Mother came.
It is so important that as Catholics have devotion to our own guardian angel.
Yeah, and one of the first appearances was September 29th on the Feast of the Guardian Angels. September 29th was one of the first. And this is heaven's nuances of how they speak to people. Heaven is a beautiful, beautiful orchestra. If you ever hear an orchestra, the cacophony before it starts to play in unison, everybody working on their own strings and instruments, it's a cacophony of disorganized notes. And then all of a sudden, the master waves his baton, le baton. And then all of a sudden, it all just comes into a beautiful sound. This is what heaven is. Heaven orchestrates everything in advance in a beautiful, beautiful way with all of these sub terra, as well as open signs for people to draw conclusions of authenticity. That there is no chance or coincidence in heaven when they make a move. That's why no matter what these dicasteries say, if it's true, it's going to come out over time, in the same way Sister Faustina did, in the same way others that have taken longer periods of time. You know, Saint Faustina died in 1939, just as the Germans were coming into Germany. She died at the age of 33, and like Catherine of Siena did in 1939. And so and since she only had a third grade education, her writing was very, very cryptic, and it grammatically wasn't clean. And so it took all the way from 1939 till 2001, I guess, with John Paul II as the first saint of the new millennium. And John Paul died actually on the eve of Divine Mercy Sunday. So this is the beautiful orchestra, how heaven works in a beautiful, beautiful symphony where everything is organized, everything is the way they want it, but many times through human interaction, there comes to be contamination. Very, very common. And frankly, the demonic enters. Wherever Jesus is, the demonic was there.
Wow.
I remember the first time I went to Medjugorje, it was actually 1990. And our son was too young, but we took our daughter, who I guess the time, I don't know, she was 11 or 12. I'm not sure. 10, 11, 12, 13, I forget. But we literally were on a bus coming from Split. And we get off the bus, and then all of a sudden, my daughter's off the bus, my wife is off the bus, my foot is still on the bus. I'm ready to just hit the ground. And there's a man there frothing at the mouth, barking like a dog. He had like a priest vestments on. He was not a priest. And he had rosary beads, big rosary beads around his waist that were dragging on the ground. And here he is frothing at the mouth, barking like a dog. I turned to my daughter and wife, who were just in front of me. I said, we're on holy ground. Why? Because wherever Jesus is and his mother, there's the demonic. I'll never forget that day. I literally said to them, we're on holy ground. It was my first trip there in 1990. Why? Because Satan always gravitates to destroy what God is doing. People have to understand who your enemy is, how Satan works. He's out to John 10:10, my favorite verse in the Bible. There's 10:10a, the first part of it. Jesus is out to kill, destroy, and steal. Look at how emotive. Kill, destroy, and steal. And then John 10:10b, but I come to give you life and give it more abundantly. Look at the dichotomy. Look at the contrast in those two elements of life. One is destruction and the other is abundant living. And personally for me, I have lived the latter life. I have lived a life that I'm just so thankful for it. I made a decision young to follow the Lord, and I have been a recipient of abundant living. I'm very thankful for it with great gratitude.
Hello mga faith, Brother Adrian Milag here, at gusto ko palang magpasalamat sa Merchiful team for creating our Catholic merch dito sa Adrian Milag TV merch. Itong magaganda nating merch. Kunyari, ito sinusuot ko, yung Our Lady of Guadalupe. At mga ka-faith, sa mga nagtatanong at interested to avail this Catholic merch, at marami pa tayong mga katulad nitong mga design. Ilalagay ko yung link sa taas or sa baba ng video na to. Pwede kayong avail sa mismong Merchiful Shop at sa Shopee. Ayan, so mga ka-faith, i-avail nyo na yan. Ilalagay ko yung link sa taas or sa baba ng video na to. Thank you and God bless.